Africa has seen an increase in human trafficking during the pandemic. Justice and Constitutional Development Deputy Minister John Jeffrey says more children have been trafficked for sexual exploitation. Jeffrey was speaking on World Day Against Human Trafficking in Pretoria this week and joins us live to talk about the worrying trend. Deputy Minister, grateful for your time. Welcome to Newsfeed PM. So give us an idea of the numbers. When we talk about an increase, you said it's not a sharp spike, but how bad is it?
Yeah, the numbers, I mean, trafficking is a secretive crime. People get trafficked because they're vulnerable. They get trapped in the situation, and they very often don't want to report it because of being trapped. So it's only if they're rescued that it really comes to the fore. So the numbers are still relatively low. I think up to about 50 cases on the roll currently, court roll. And then more that the police are investigating. But what COVID has done is increase the vulnerability of people to human trafficking. That is the main problem with the current situation we're in.
And you reference reported cases. I suppose the data would be more revealing if we spoke about people who've actually, if we're able to find out how many people have actually been moved either within the country for sexual exploitation and elsewhere, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, in terms of the cases, the bulk of it is women. I think 90% of the victims of the cases that have been picked up are women, and the vast majority are for trafficking for sexual exploitation purposes. Labor trafficking, there's I think only been about 2 or 3 cases that have been detected in this period.
Why is getting credible or accurate as possible data still such a challenge for you?
As I said, I think the problem is the reporting issue. People get trafficked because they're vulnerable. They're looking for work very often. They might be foreign migrants who get trafficked into the country. They're not going to want to come forward and say, look, I'm in this situation or I've been trafficked. It's more difficult for them. Even people trafficked for sexual exploitation, there would be issues tying them to the trafficker. Things like debt bondage, where they owe money and they're having to pay off that debt by having sex with people. Or other examples would be where they're under drugs, because that also gets used quite a bit to keep the victims compliant.
What about the children who you say you've dealt with cases or an increase of children being taken for sexual exploitation? Where are they being taken to and by whom? Is it mainly individuals, syndicates?
It seems to be more individual. There's one case, there's a couple of cases with young babies of babies being trafficked for illegal adoption. Then it's basically sexual exploitation, and a 14-year-old girl was trafficked for substance distribution. And those are mainly, as far as I recall, in Gauteng, those cases.
And on the issue of the baby who was trafficked for adoption, you've said, speaking this week, that what you're seeing is a rise in parents who, due to the pandemic and perhaps loss of income and associated problems, have become so desperate, not that it's excusable, that they're actually selling off their children.
Yes, that's basically what has been happening in a few cases, and I'm sure it is because of the economic circumstances, in particular heightened by the pandemic.
And that's where I'd imagine the likes of social development have to then come into the picture and work with you to help not only children who have been trafficked or been survivors of an attempted trafficking situation, but also parents who find themselves in these situations.
Sure. Dealing with trafficking is very much a multidisciplinary matter. There's the law enforcement sides from the police, the prosecuting authority, but the Department of Social Development are very key in terms of accrediting shelters and accrediting victims of trafficking. And then they obviously have a key role to play in preventing the circumstances for trafficking to arise. So, for example, dealing with substance abuse, dealing with poverty, and the example that you gave of parents who try and then sell their child because they just can't keep that child.
Mm-hmm. And often when we discuss human trafficking, we think of people being moved out of South Africa and sold off elsewhere for labor or sexual exploitation. But I'm wondering about the extent of the problem domestically, where a person is moved, let's say, from Gauteng to the Free State for similar purposes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, look, we are listed by the United States as a transit country for trafficking. We haven't seen too much evidence of that. There may be ships stopping at our ports carrying victims of trafficking on their way to another country. But in terms of people being flown out of South Africa to other places, there's not been so much evidence of that. But a lot of it is internal trafficking. And also I think what's important to note is trafficking is not about walking down the street and then suddenly you get kidnapped and you're held hostage. Some of the sort of methods used are to exploit vulnerabilities, exploit young people looking for jobs, making friends with them on Facebook, pretending that you've got a job, basically then meeting up with them and then grabbing them in that way. So it's very few cases of people just being abducted on the street by strangers. It's a lot more work is put into winning over the victim of trafficking and getting them enmeshed in the trafficking syndicate.
Justice and Constitutional Development Deputy Minister John Jeffrey, good to speak to you, sir. Thank you.